Because I think that anything that you want to accomplish, it doesn't not matter what it is. It doesn't matter what you're passionate about. It doesn't matter whether you want to accomplish something in a hobby or at work or at home. Connection is the vehicle of delivery for that impact or change.
I am so pumped for today's episode of Think Outside the Boss. Today, I have with me the one and only Chad Littlefield. And if you do not know Chad, then you are in for a treat today. And I highly recommend pause this podcast and go to YouTube, look up Chad Littlefield, and start following his content. It is really game-changing in the art of connection, facilitation, and training. So Forbes calls Chad a global expert on asking questions that build trust and connection. And if you have been following me for any length of time, you know that this is right up my alley. So I am so glad that you are with me today. Chad is also a TEDx speaker. He is a best-selling author, and he is the creator of the We Connect cards. If you guys have been in an offsite with me, you have seen these We Connect cards. So I have them here. And these are the brainchild of Chad and his late co-founder, Will Wise. And they are wonderful at sparking connection in offsites. So if you guys have been with me in any type of leadership offsite or training, these are the cards that I use. Chad's the one who created them. And Chad is also my go-to for content and ideas and structures and activities and different things that I use in all of my offsites and all of my meetings about creating connection. So he has a YouTube library of over 500 videos, which is millions and millions of views. And just a note about how I came to know Chad. So you guys know my story of 5 years ago, I left my corporate job, launched a leadership development company. And there's a lot of things that I do. So I do facilitation, training, teaching, coaching, consulting, all of these things. And I have found that I have just fallen in love with and am really uniquely gifted at the art of facilitation. And it makes me laugh when I say this because what kid is like, when I grow up, I want to be a facilitator. Like nobody says that. And so it cracks me up, but I'm just in love with the art of it because I get to bring people together and ask some questions that really teach people how to think about things in a different way. And more than anything, the work that I do, it's really about drawing people together to have conversations that are awkward. And the only way you can do that is to really start with connection, and connection leads to trust. And that goes into the 5 dysfunctions pyramid of trust, healthy conflict, commitment, et cetera, all the way up to results. So much of what I have learned from the past couple of years has been from Chad's work. Facilitation is really a part of a leader's job, but we don't think of it that much. So if you are a leader and you have to lead an offsite, lead a brainstorming session, or just lead a client meeting if you're in sales, I highly recommend going to Chad's YouTube page, follow and subscribe, and watch some of his videos. They're all pretty short, but it just will give you a different idea about how to start something. Everything that Chad does is about fostering connection between people. And from there, once you have connection, then the content will really hit home. So without further ado, say hello to Chad Littlefield. Welcome to today's episode of Think Outside the Boss. And I have with me the one and only Chad Littlefield. I feel like I need like a soundtrack. I need the soundboard going to do the applause for you.
There's actually 2 Chad Littlefields. And if you Google Chad Littlefield, we won't go into this other Chad Littlefield. I'm the one who's still alive and well. We'll just start off with that. For everybody listening, just like a little quiet private note, Katie just said all these kind words before we hit record. And so anyway, grateful. I'm smiling. I'm happy to jump in.
Cool. Well, Chad, tell us, when did you first realize that you were a leader?
In order to answer that question, we need to all get on the same page on what a leader is. And my late co-founder and co-author, Will Wise, in my opinion, had the best definition for leadership. And it was what he called the layman's definition of leadership. And that is a leader is someone who makes something happen that wasn't going to happen anyway. And I think this reduces the pressure of I need a title in order to, or some sort of position of influence to be a leader. So for me, my mom would probably be even more qualified to answer this question. But she said, when I was a unknown, unsuccessful professional speaker and author, she didn't even think of this story. But once I quote made it, she remembered that on a Christmas holiday, her side of the family is gigantic. So it was a giant family holiday. I found a stool at one point and I grabbed an ornament off of the Christmas tree, and I don't even really remember this, but singing this ridiculous song. And I wasn't aiming to garner and make a moment or an audience. I was kind of just doing my own thing, as she tells it. But she knew that I was like gathering an audience. And so I think that moment for her created a memory. It was this very, I think I was like 6 years old or something. For everybody else, it was this very cute, memorable moment. And for me, I think that's probably the first time that in my somewhat conscious awareness that I made something happen that wasn't going to happen anyway.
Do you remember that moment, or do you just remember it through her story?
Memory is a tricky thing. If you studied psychology, it's like we're really good at creating false memories. So I've heard that story so many times. I feel like I vaguely remember that story, but I don't know. It's not like the most vivid, visceral memory that I have. Does it count? Does it still count as an answer to a question?
Yes, it absolutely counts. It absolutely counts. You referenced the term when you made it. So how did you define making it?
Okay, so Steve Jobs, which by the way, making it as a intentionally small business, intentionally small solo practice, I'm actually actively trying to not scale, trying to make an impact widely through publishing on YouTube and books and the card decks that I've created and whatnot. But like I really don't strive to have 2,000 employees. That sounds really stressful to me. I'm making that distinction clear because the example I'm about to offer is the reference of Steve Jobs felt like he made it the first time he saw somebody out in the wild using an Apple product, like on their own. He's like, oh my God, I made that. And then like, this is just some person on the street using it. And so I use that as my answer. The first time that I met somebody who showed me We Connect cards, like, hey, look at this awesome card deck that I use. You should totally check it out. You might like it. And I was like, it looks really awesome. I actually made it.
Like these?
Yes, like those.
These sticks?
Yes, those ones. Yeah, so it's like, and I think for me, the North Star, like the behind the scenes mission of what I'm up to is I want to create as many conversations and connections on Earth that would never otherwise have happened. All right, so I want to be the reason, or I want to be the starting point, the conversation starter, if you will, of as many meaningful conversations and connections that otherwise never would have happened. Because I think that anything that you want to accomplish, it does not matter what it is. It doesn't matter what you're passionate about. It doesn't matter whether you want to accomplish something in a hobby or at work or at home. Connection is the vehicle of delivery for that impact or change. And for me, like the metric of success is when I get a note in my inbox that the deck of cards was used in Saudi Arabia at some oil company. And then the next day I get an email that it was like somebody brought it on a camping trip with 12 friends and it totally transformed that camping trip. And then, so it's like all these different stories and moments and contexts that are happening while I'm sleeping. And I think that brings me joy.
Yeah. Definition of success right there. So one of the reasons that I gravitated to your work is because it focuses so much on connection. And I realized early on that was a gift that I had. I was like, I don't know, I wish I could sing and dance on Broadway. I wish I could play the guitar or the piano. But like the gift I have is really connecting with people. And the way that you have framed it up is connection. It's like the start of everything, the start of every meeting, every conversation, even when you are doing like large scale speaking events. So my question for you is, when did you first become obsessed with connection and realize that was such a game changer?
When I failed out of medical school, which was really early. I failed out of medical school after I took my first chemistry class freshman year of college. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to medical school. I thought I had seen the movie Patch Adams with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And in the movie, Patch becomes a doctor. And he uses, in that movie, I think the main top line theme is he uses humor to connect with people. What I see is that he actually heals people through connection. Humor is one of his tools, but he is a master empathizer. He's unbelievably profoundly empathetic. And I saw that movie and I was like, I want to be Patch Adams. That was when I was like 10 years old or something.
Yeah.
And then I took a chemistry class in college. I was like, ooh, this is not going to work out. So the pivot became me being ferociously curious about whether or not that was just Hollywood or what actually is the impact of human relatedness. What impact does it have on our performance, on our psychology, on our well-being, on our longevity, on teams? And so I just got real nerdy for a long time and studied all of that. And to save you a whole lot of years. The short answer of what I picked up is it makes a difference across every domain, and a pretty profound one. There's a reason that the previous Surgeon General said that our lack of connection is equivalent or worse to smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And so this ripples through everything.
I just have to repeat that because I don't know that I've heard that stat before. So our lack of connection is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day.
He published a pretty big manifesto on the epidemic of loneliness. And my work, even though the mission of my company and my work is focused on making connection easy, I don't really even use the word loneliness. And I'm primarily focused on professional at work, or whether you're nonprofit or community change level of connection, not so much personal friendships.
Yeah.
That said, a lot of what I talk about could be ruthlessly stolen and reinterpreted and applied to that personal element. But yeah, the whole piece that was written and published on the epidemic of loneliness has that in there for you.
Yes. I also love your definition of what you do, as you call yourself a professional arms uncrosser, because I spent 20 years in corporate America, and I was often the victim of terrible trainings and offsites and boring speeches. And that isn't limited to the job that I was in, but that is something that drove me when I was often tapped to lead teams and train and do sorts of things, because I always tried to make it fun, because we often started like this. First of all, is that title on your business card, like professional arms uncrosser?
It should be. Maybe I'm due. I think I'm out of business cards. I think I'm due for an update, and maybe inspired by you in this podcast, it will say professional arms uncrosser. I love that you sat in both seats. You sat in the seat with your arms crossed, like, oh my gosh, this is so not useful, relevant, good use of my time, etc. And now you're in the role of trying to make that time useful, relevant, and meaningful for people and organizations. For me, it is one of my mentors, Matt Church, says that expertise without empathy is like doesn't fit or doesn't have a place or isn't really. I think expertise without empathy is just rude. So when you have a trainer or an external keynote speaker come into an event and they give all this advice on how you should live your life, but they have zero expertise in what your life is like, and they don't demonstrate that they have a high level of empathy for what it's really. And so I was really motivated by this. I think the antidote to that, so if that's the problem, I think one big antidote to that is this concept and philosophy of connection before content. And this is not like you walk into somebody's office and you just like small talk chit chat them before you ask for them to send you a PDF or something. Like connection before content, it's got to connect to the reason that gathering is happening. And so if you're having a meeting, let's say if a bunch of jet ski insurance professionals are having a meeting, the connection before content for that group should be something along the lines of what's one of the most wild client stories you have from the last 2 months of working this job. So it's related to where they're at. It's not what kind of candy bar would you like to be. Yeah, but the professional arms uncrosser, what I find is like just about every person actually on earth wants to do good and overall has a positive like aspiration for themselves. They might appear like grumpy and critical as all get out, but most people like want something good for their own life. And so if you can frame the reason for you being there as helping them get to where they want to go, and not just frame it, but if you actually help people get where they want to go, people's arms tend to uncross. They're like, oh, this isn't so bad. But it's that like expertise without empathy it's a really easy way to uncross people's arms to show that you hear them and you see them and you get them and you accept them exactly as they are. And so an example of this, if I walk into an arena of 6,000 people, I know that 5,000 of them don't want to be there. And so at the very outset, I'll say something to the effect of, so for the 11 of you who really want to be here, welcome, I'm glad to be hanging out with you. And for the other 5,597 people whose boss told them to come, welcome, I'm also really glad you're here and I've sat in your shoes before too. And that's a relatively disarming statement to help uncross people's arms. The next most disarming thing is like, that's just the warm up is I'm going to invite them to actually contribute in the moment. Because if I just talk at them the whole time, I'm forcing them into the role of critic or consumer, there is no invitation they can't actually be a contributor. They can't actually connect with others because I just stole all of the airtime, right? I'm the one holding the mic and everybody else is holding their breath. Not useful for uncrossing people's arms, actually. So even if people do not want to participate, and in their mind, they're just like, I hope this isn't interactive. I hope I can just sit back and passively take this in, which is a lot of people, right? If you frame their effort as bringing value to themselves and everybody else, most people, at least for an experiment, will uncross their arms. Anyway, you just tapped that button, Katie, and I just went on a rant. So what struck you about that rant, Katie?
So many things, because it's like just the way that you first like disarm people with the humor of, for the 11 of you who are excited to be here. I do something similar too in the offsites where I'm like, or, when I'm leading like the team trainings and the offsites, and I'm like, okay, so there's 3 types of people, and it's not those who can count on those who can't, although that is always a joke, but that always gets like 3 laughs.
I haven't actually heard that one. It took me a minute. Solid joke, but it took me a good 8 seconds to get it.
Oh yeah. My kids are in scouts, and so there's always a dad joke competition at scouts. It's phenomenal.
Awesome.
Anyway, I digress. But it is, I realized as you were saying that about disarming people, I'm like, oh yeah, I do that in my own way too. Of like, there's 3 types of people. There's the learner, the vacationer, and the prisoner. And so in every training. And so I'm like, all are welcome. I'm not going to ask you to self-identify who you are or call each other out. But my hope is that if you feel like a prisoner, that you can at least step up to feeling like you're a vacationer or get you to the learner. And the vacationer is the person who is like, sweet, I put up my out of office up. I'm off work today. I'm just going to sit in this training and I don't have to absorb anything or give anything. I'm just can kind of be off in my head or on my laptop and not actually be present, right?
I love this. I love this metaphor because there's also like a room for invitation to say, if you're a vacationer or a learner and you're like doing your thing and you're focused and you're happy, and this really burly, angry, violent looking prisoner sits down next to you and they look especially grumpy and they're kind of bringing down your vibe.
Yeah.
Feel free to move seats. Yeah.
Yes.
That's funny.
Yes,
Which is actually, in some way, that message is actually for prisoners to say, hey, don't ruin everybody. If you're a prisoner, don't ruin everybody else's experience.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
I tell my kids, I'm like, can you just suffer in silence? I mean, I'm not, we've gone way off on a tangent. I'm like, I'm not telling you not to suffer. I actually got this from she wrote Untamed.
I'll Google it for you. I'll be like your podcast assistant.
Glennon Doyle.
You got it. Look at that. The brain is faster than my fingers.
Because she was sharing about how she wanted her kids to feel their emotions because, I mean, I'm a Gen Xer and we were not taught that. It was like, no, just kind of deal with it still. Mental health wasn't a big thing when I was grown up. And then she posted one day, she's like, sometimes I regret not teaching my kids how to just suffer in silence, how I was taught. I'm like, we don't need to know every emotion that you're going through.
Yeah.
And it totally struck me that day that I was like, seriously. I appreciate that we're all human and we all have these emotions, and I'm not telling you not to feel your emotions, but could you just feel them away from me?
I'm so appreciating this. I can't wait to bring this up as a topic of discussion with my wife and our kids, because I'm sure we both have philosophies on this idea. But I think along with mental health, also comes along this idea, and the same with psychological safety. Along with that idea comes along psychological risk taking. Like when you put yourself out there, you're taking a risk. It's not a risk-free endeavor to talk in a group, to stand up, to share an idea, to stand up for what's right. It's like, these are not risk-free endeavors. There's psychological risk. You can't wait around until you're just in this like happy utopia where nobody will judge you. You just need to take a risk. And I think sometimes the suffer in silence, like along with mental health, also comes this mental toughness of like in a physical endeavor, like before we podcast, I'm a swimmer, And I typically have swam like relatively short distances, but I kind of have my sights set on potentially trying to swim across Lake Erie, which is 25 miles, which will be like 15 hours of pain. And it will not be fun. But in order to actually even get to like close to the place where I could do that, including this morning, I have to just get used to enduring pain and not telling anybody about it. And I think that physical pain, I think there are some times where it's just saying, yeah, life is hard. I'm in a group with the author, Mark Manson, of The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And overall, the book was like a little bit crass for me. I love Mark, but my favorite little line in the book, he shared a story about like a farmer 200 years ago who woke up and like people got depressed 200 years ago. And you know what a depressed farmer did when he woke up in the morning? He went out and tilled the fields. Because
I was going to say he went to work.
Yeah, he went to work. He like went out and tilled the fields because nobody would eat if he didn't.
Right.
And there's limits. There's a balance, right? So I'm not saying suffer in silence all the time and never divulge and never, because this is actually also antithetical to connection. But I think this is actually like, I haven't quite brought up in any YouTube videos or anything that I've written or published. Like this is a fun conversation for me because there's a bell curve of connection. There is such thing as too little connection, and there is at work, let's say in a work context. There's such thing as too little connection, and it like prevents you from getting things done. People get into conflicts, everything's inefficient, communication doesn't flow smoothly, all this nonsense. And then there's also such thing as too much connection, where it's like everybody's dating each other and the drama is just real high and people are quitting because they dated, and this isn't going to work, right? And so the bell curve of connection is you find this spot that you're like connected where you really trust that person has your best interest in mind. You know enough about them to make communication shortcuts happen, but you don't need transcripts of all their therapy sessions in order to be productive at work. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the two types of trust, performance-based and vulnerability-based?
Who published this?
So Pat Lencioni.
Okay. Yeah.
I am a huge fan of Pat. We're like on a first name basis, you know.
Yeah. Pat.
Pat and I.
He's going to be on the next podcast. Pat.
Yeah.
I'll text him. Yeah.
This was a game-changing thing because, so when I was sharing with you, and my audience knows this whole story about how I was at corporate, the first 20 years of my life, I was working for other people. I was an employee. I was corporate for 13 years of my career. And I left because I'm like, something is missing. I worked my way up to this level of leadership. And I was at Procter & Gamble, which is a phenomenal company. I'm in Cincinnati. And so it was just a phenomenal company to work for, known for developing leaders. So I was in sales. So it's like they teach us how to negotiate, right? And like you get that type of training. And then you get what I call the don't get us sued training. All the legal policies and all of that, absolutely important. But what was often missing was what we're talking about now, which is connection. How do you build trust? How do you tell your best friend who works for you, like one of your work peers, that they screwed up that presentation? It would be better if they did XYZ. How do you encourage someone? Because we don't even talk about encouragement enough. We usually, when we talk about feedback, we go to the negative. And it was really, how do you get people to buy in? How do you hold people accountable? And how do you move from being a peer on a team to a promotion? And now you're not the peer and you're the boss. So all of these types of things is what I started to really explore. And that's why I launched the work that I do. And core to that is this idea of there's two types of trust, because trust is such a big word. And so there's performance-based trust, which is reliability. So that's like when I hire you to speak to a stadium, I know that you are going to nail it. I could hire you to speak to my leadership team. I could hire you to speak, to a stadium full of people, and you're going to nail it because you have a track record of doing that and you're reliable. The other part of trust is vulnerability-based trust, which is a lot of what we're talking about of like, do you have my back? What are you saying about me when I'm not in the room? Are you standing up for me? Can I share something with you in confidence? And so as we're talking about, like when you're talking about the connection going this way, one of the core things that I teach, and all my clients that are listening are just going to laugh, but like, so I created the XY axis, as anyone does who's creating content. But it's like you have performance-based trust on the y-axis, and then you have vulnerability-based trust on the x-axis. And the upper right quadrant is what's called a culture of feedback. And it's where because you need both the empathy, you need that vulnerability, but you also need it with accountability. So you need both of those to draw people out.
This is a quiz on your own model. What's the high vulnerability trust, low performance trust quadrant?
The high vulnerability, low performance, I call that a culture of comfort. So we're like
Yeah.
a family is
Yeah.
typically that. And it's when you have high empathy, but you have empathy without the accountability.
Yeah, it's like the person keeps their job for a year longer than they should because
Yeah.
it's like you don't want to let them go because their life situation is hard, but actually they're like literally not performing at all at work
Yeah.
and costing the business money. Yes.
Yeah. A
Cool.
lot of,
Yeah, that's a cool model. Solid.
yeah. And then the upper one, so when you have high performance, low vulnerability, I'm workshopping this title. At first, I called it a culture of burnout. And then, but I was like, yeah, like I think that might be it. And then I switched it. I'm also considering culture of pleasing. But either way, it's you care about the performance and not the vulnerability. So it's the accountability without the empathy of like, I don't care what's going on in your life. I just need you to do your job.
Yeah, it sounds actually to me like a culture of isolation.
Oh,
Where you're just human doings and the other 95% of who you are on planet Earth, other than the work output. I'm not Catholic, but the Pope recently released this giant 42,000 word statement on AI. And I was super curious about this because a leader like that, like there aren't a lot of leaders like
yeah.
that have released a statement on AI. And so,
And I wonder if he
the
used
implic-
AI to write it. That's
Well,
4,200
you know,
words.
you know how I consumed it actually? I found a guy on Spotify who started, it was like on a podcast, it was like a 4-hour podcast and the podcast started out with, yeah, so the Pope released this statement on AI and there's a bunch of published audio formats of like AIs reading the statement. And I think that's kind of not the point. So I'm just going to bear down here, no edits, and read you this entire 42,000. It's like all his coughs and pauses and water breaks are in it. And it was awesome, right? It was like fantastic.
I love
But
it.
the reason I'm bringing this up is he really makes a point to separate people's worth from their output.
Yeah.
And whenever he talks about that, there's over 100 times he used the word dignity. And if you're listening, even if you're driving, it would be worth pulling over and just Googling the word dignity. I'm not going to share it with you now because if I share it with you, it'll go in one ear and out the other. But actually search on AI of your choice, search the word dignity and look up what it means because I think it's a profound concept and idea to just hold in mind as you walk through the world. Now, if you only prioritize dignity and there's no performance-based trust, then you're in that culture, you start to slip into that culture of family, like you said, or we're like a family, which can have issues. It also can have a ceiling. I coach the CEO of Typeform.com, this tech company, like a cool survey tool. So I coached the CEO right when they were about Dunbar's number, 150 employees. And I kind of coached him out of the role of CEO because he had started doing all these things he didn't want to do. And I'm sharing this with permission.
Yeah.
His realization was that at around 150 people, the we're like a family really started to break down. Because it's now we're like a family where you show up to the family reunion every 5 years and you don't know most people's names. And you certainly don't recognize your second cousin's kids at all. You've never met
That's
them.
my family,
And
yes.
so really what that is, even though it's called a family reunion, functionally and tactically, it's like a strangers networking meetup that's happening downtown because there's so much. And so anyway, blah, blah, blah. I think the essence or some gem to pull out of here for me is towing the line and the balance between valuing who somebody is, not just what they do, and freeingly integrating that into what they do. And so it's able to say, hey, I know based on our conversations that you have a lot going on at home right now, and we are at work. And so the stuff has to get done. So either we have to reprioritize and you need to recruit somebody else's help to do this, but we can't just continue on endlessly like this. And I'm saying this with pure love. And if you were in my shoes, you'd probably sit down and have the same chat. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that is the hardest conversation to have because you know that they are a fit for the company or you care about them deeply, but they're in a situation where they can't perform, certainly not to the level that the company needs or that you're used to. But it's worth consideration of if someone is in a tough situation over time of, hey, let's talk about, I don't know that this is working right now. I would love to support you, but it's just, I think that is the hardest conversation to have. And I've talked to so many leaders who are in that version in some sort. And it's really hard when it's a member of your family. That makes it even harder, or it's a long-term employee. And so there's lots of different ways that you can handle it. But I think the worst thing to do is just completely ignore it, because then you're not serving anyone. You're not serving that person, and you're not serving the company and the team. So it's interesting that you bring that up.
I shared office space with a guy named Bill Tallarico, and he used to say, what you tolerate is what you endorse.
Yeah.
And so if you just let it go on, you're actually saying this is okay. I think the kindest response that I've seen to somebody who's not performing because they're in a really tough spot is, hey, I just want to check in. I think something's going on, but I don't know. And you don't need to share with me, but I'm open to you sharing if you want to. But I'm talking with you because I would love to be able to, A, support you and potentially give you a week to 2 weeks guilt-free, completely off to go rest, restore, prioritize what you need to prioritize, and totally forget about the company and the work because it's probably less important than your family.
Yeah.
And then come back.
Yes.
And do good
right.
work. Right. And then come back and do good work. But that's a very kind response, as opposed to saying, and I think this does happen in corporate a lot, of, hey, I know you're struggling, but also can you kind of step it up? It's like, that's not actually very empathetic at all.
No.
Yeah.
No. So I want to ask you some of your questions.
Okay. Go for it.
So I'm using the We Connect cards. We're going to link to these because I love it. You can get them on Amazon. You can get it directly from the We and Me website, which is Chad's company. So, Chad, do you want to go with the future-focused ones, or do you want to go with like
the future-focused?
Okay.
Because, and just for context, you already have this context, Katie, but for context, I created the future-focused deck because I was asked this question: what is something you'd like to do more of by a mentor? And my answer is something I hadn't done in 6 years, but 6 months after he asked me that question, it's like something I really cared about and prioritized, but deprioritized because I had young kids. 6 months after he asked me that question, I went and took time and did that thing that I answered. And it was scuba diving. And so my head popped out of the water after the scuba diving for the first time in 6 years, after growing up scuba diving for lobster in Massachusetts. Love being underwater. It's like meditation for me. When my head popped out of the water, I was like, oh, if Mark didn't ask me that question, there is a 0% chance that I would have done this and prioritized it. And so it was the realization that questions aren't just good to connect people or spark creativity or get new ideas. They can actually, a really beautiful question can actually be an edit button to what happens next. And so, what do you got? I'm so curious.
I love it. And since you had shared earlier that you moved to Lake Erie because you love the water, can you scuba dive? Do you want to scuba dive in Lake Erie?
Yeah. I think most people don't want to scuba dive. I want to scuba dive in Lake Erie. So I did. When I moved here, I went on a couple shipwreck dives.
So this question, it's a blue one.
All right.
I'm doing the Chad Littlefield to Chad Littlefield right now.
It's awesome. What skill of yours isn't being fully used? Derek Sivers, who wrote several books, but the book title that changed my life. The book was fine and good and worth buying, but the book title was so great, and it is Hell Yeah or No. And it's just a decision-making filter. Either this is an absolute hell yeah, I'm totally in, or say no to it so that you can prioritize stuff that is a hell yeah. He wrote at one point about, he's moved all around. He's a very nomadic entrepreneur. He's moved all around. And in places that he moved, like when he moved to Singapore, he really had a local focus, and he didn't really pay attention to publishing things widely. He just got involved in his community and really drilled in. And before I moved to Lake Erie, I lived in Pittsburgh, and I had zero community tie whatsoever. I didn't have family in Pittsburgh. It was like kind of just a layover for me and the family. It was like a halfway point between our two families. And moving to Erie, my intent was, and still is, to get much more involved in the community. And so the way that I want to do that, I think, in terms of the way people donate, like you can donate money, and that's cool at one layer of energy, but I think one of the most, and you should do that, and at a more transformative level, you donate your gifts to the people where that really transform. And started a conversation with the mayor in Erie. They're hosting these dialogues. They want to get people more involved in meetings and make them less didactic, one way, like mayor, and then people complaining about things the mayor isn't doing, and get people connected and involved. And I'm underutilized right now, but I'm wanting to weave in what I'm good at, which is facilitating a big group and making it feel like a really small group and having people leave, whether they came with complaints and grievances or hopes and possibilities, having them all leave feeling like we're in this together. We're more connected now. I understand the other side better, and I actually want to get to work on this. And yeah, underutilized now, but if you happen to be listening to Katie's podcast from Erie, Pennsylvania, email me. I'll probably volunteer some expensive services for very cheap or free. There you go.
You got that? Well, hashtag
Yes.
Erie, Pennsylvania
Yeah.
in the show notes.
Perfect.
When I post on social, you can repost it to your Erie
Yeah.
network.
It's
There
great.
we go. Cool. Well, Chad, are you ready for the lightning round?
I am ready for the lightning round. Hit me.
Is it a no
This
or
is-
a hell yeah?
Oh, it's a hell yeah.
Cool.
Call
These
back.
are the same 5 questions I ask every guest on the podcast. Question number 1 is, do you have a favorite personality assessment?
I like Strengths Finder because it tells people what they're good at and they can double down on that. And so I think even if a personality assessment is wrong, if it tells you what you're good at, you tend to listen for and try to uplift and prioritize those gifts. Even though with Strengths Finder, everybody's default is like, what's my number 34? What's my weakest thing when they take it?
Totally.
Yeah, I know. It's everybody's default. But that said, it gives you your top 5 and you get to have that in mind. And I think that I think actually that personality assessment, instead of just like here's a picture of you and some self-awareness, I think that assessment is a leader by Will's definition. That assessment makes something happen that wasn't going to happen anyway. So when one of my strengths came back as includer, okay, I like naturally do this to some degree, but now I'm really tuned in. If somebody's in the room and I feel like they are unsure of whether they're going to stay or whether they belong or whatnot, I'm like especially tuned into that person because I'm like, this is my strength. I got to go use it. I can't let this person fall through the cracks and leave thinking, wow, that really sucked. Yeah.
I'm a fellow includer in Strengths
go.
Finder. So number 2, what is a book that was instrumental in your life?
I listened to a fiction book, a science fiction book, for the first time in 20 plus years. I just have only been a nerd and listened or read nonfiction. But my wife and I listened to Project Hail Mary together and then watched the movie afterward. And it was such a fun experience to have one AirPod in my ear and one AirPod in her ear. And we were like, we'd be like cleaning the kitchen or something, but listening to this book. And so that was like a beautiful new little unlock of a fun way to spend time with Kate in a way that we haven't.
I love it. I see the little heart emojis now.
Yeah.
like
so
floating through the
beautiful.
kitchen. And the kids
I will
rolling their
say-
eyes like,
Yeah.
What
My
is-
kids are 3 and 6 at the time of recording, so we're not listening to anything while they're awake. So this is post them being in bed only. I think from a work perspective, I love the book Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. It's all about why we remember some things and not others. So why do you remember a moment from 10 years ago, but not the moment that happened 5 minutes later? So what was it about that particular thing, that piece of content, etc.? And I think they, for the most part, practice what they're preaching in the book. And so lots of like sticky, good stories and examples and whatnot.
what is some of the best advice that you've ever been given?
One of I would say my first and very formative mentor, Eric Tyler, wrote a book called The Best Advice So Far. And he's mentored youth for his entire career. And he wrote this book because people would always ask him for his advice. And they were like, I wish I had a pocket-sized Eric when I was in certain situations. And so he was like, all right, fine. I'll just make a pocket-sized version of me. And I'm going to call it The Best Advice So Far. And the entire book, the umbrella piece of advice that encapsulates just about every other piece of advice is you always have a choice. We do not choose what happens to us or around us, but we always have a choice in how we respond. And if you just choose to believe that or try that belief on, it will move you out of victimhood in all situations. And that is transformational for anybody in any context.
Ah, that's beautiful. Question 4, what is a failure that you cherish?
Every facilitator, speaker has missteps along their way. They try to joke out and they're like, well, that did not land at all. That did not uncross people's arms. That crossed people's arms. But I had, actually, funny enough, I mentioned this client earlier, Typeform. It was a company based in Barcelona. And so I was coaching their CEO, but we were also hired to go in and facilitate their company offsite. So 150 people from Typeform from a super global company. And we put so much effort into designing this retreat. It's the most custom designed thing we've ever done. We did this giant exercise where we actually printed out sections of a giant type form and the group. It was like the coolest design ever. And it totally missed the cultural mark for some people. And it was the first program that I led that wasn't in the US. And I'm like I tend to be pretty culturally tuned in. I had a job working for a group called World in Conversation. Half my life was spent in conversations with people from other countries in different contexts. But I just had this blind spot, and we facilitated the retreat for a good swath of Europeans that were there. They were like, this was just too American. And I was so bummed. We had written a book called Ask Powerful Questions, and the tagline of Typeform was Ask Awesome. Like, it was just perfect client fit in so many ways, and we just bombed facilitating the retreat. And I cherish that because I got to work with an awesome client and facilitate a retreat in a cool place in Barcelona. But man, I would like to still be working with Typeform, but I am not.
Also, hashtag Typeform.
Yeah. Hashtag Erie, hashtag Typeform, hashtag not Typeform. Yeah.
Final question. This is my personal favorite. So you are a speaker. When you are announced on stage, what is your walk-on song? Or maybe what would you love it to be to get yourself hyped up, to get the crowd hyped up?
It's funny. I love music, but I have this weird thing. I could memorize a textbook if you gave it to me, but I can't sing you or tell you the lyrics to my favorite songs. I just have this block where it's like, I love the music, love the vibe, love the feel, love what it does in my heart, cannot remember the words. And so my favorite song or in a walk-on song context, is one that nobody's ever heard of called Earth Groove.
Okay.
By like VJ and Sonia or something. But it's got just such a good vibe. And I have no idea what the song's about or why it was written or any context about it, but it has such a good feel. I rarely have seen a room not like start moving to that song, even though nobody knows it, which is pretty cool.
I love it. I use music as my unofficial start for sure.
Awesome.
To welcome people into a room. So Chad, thank you so much. Before we go, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that I haven't asked that you want to talk about?
I think everybody, right, one of my favorite quotes or ideas, this is a nice little bow to wrap up with, I think. One of my favorite quotes is by Howard Thurman. It's like, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I think in that note, I would love for everybody to have a bit of a crusade. I would love for everybody to have a bit of a mission to go after. My current mini crusade under the umbrella of making connection easy is to invite people to stop presenting. Just stop and start inviting people in. So if you've got, for example, just be very tactical, if you've got a slide with 100 words on it and you want to teach a group about the legal policies of how to not get Procter & Gamble sued, you can either present that slide to people and bore them to death and cross their arms, or you can say, in 3 seconds, I'm going to put up a slide and you have 30 seconds to read it, and then I'm going to ask you to tell a partner the most boring, useless piece of information on the slide and the most useful, interesting piece of information on the slide. Ready, go. And the second method will get into people's heads. It takes no effort on your, it's actually a whole lot less prep, and it'll actually create the impact that you're trying to anyway. So just stop presenting and start inviting. That's it.
So for our listeners, I highly recommend following Chad on YouTube, because if you like that last 1 minute, he's got 500 plus more videos with tidbits like that are so tactical and useful and so simple, and they don't require a lot of effort. So Chad, before we go, is there anything, where can we find you? Is there anything you want to plug before we go?
Well, I just lectured at people about stop presenting, start inviting, so I should invite them. If you are hearing this, you are invited to attend the Connector Summit, which is an event that I host every December. Katie has been to it and loved it, and I think is continuing and planning to come back again.
Yes.
And so if you want to hang out with Katie and me and 400 other really phenomenal, smart practitioners who are largely responsible for leading groups, just search Connector Summit wherever you search things these days and consider coming. That's it.
Great. Well, Chad, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have an awesome day.
You too.
Thanks for listening. If you liked something from this episode, hit share and send it to a friend or fellow leader. Don't forget to follow the show and leave a review because it helps leaders like you find us faster. This episode of Think Outside the Boss was produced by Volt Productions. I'll see you next week, and until then, keep moving forward.